two treatises of government. Two treatises of government. In the former, the false principles and foundation of Sir Robert Filmer and his followers are detected and overthrown. The latter is an essay concerning the true original extent and end of civil government. So first part of this book, he's responding to some guy I haven't heard of. Guess who won the argument? And second part's going to be his essay that I suppose is the argument he won with. On to the preface. Reader. Fuck this English. It's going to be a long one, guys. Again, just click the link, use your free month download, listen to a professional. Reader, thou hast here the beginning and end of a discourse concerning government. What fate has otherwise disposed of the papers that should have filled up the middle, and were more than all the rest, it is not worth while to tell thee. These, which remain, I hope are sufficient to establish the throne of our great restorer, our present King William, to make good his title in the consent of the people, which being the only one of all lawful governments, he has more fully and clearly than any prince in Christendom, and to justify to the world the people of England, whose love of their just and natural rights, with their resolution to preserve them, saved the nation when it was on the very brink of slavery and ruin. If these papers have that evidence, I flatter myself is to be found in them. There will be no great miss of those which are lost, and my reader may be satisfied without them. For I imagine I shall neither the time nor inclination to repeat my pains, and fill up the wanting part of my answer, by tracing Sir Robert again through all the windings and obscurities which are to be met with in the several branches of his wonderful system. The king and body of the nation have since so thoroughly confuted his hypothesis that I suppose no body heftier hereafter will have either the confidence to appear against our common safety, or be again an advocate for slavery, or the weakness to be deceived with contradictions, dressed up in a popular style, in well-turned periods. For if anyone will be at the pains himself in those parts which are here untouched, to strip Sir Robert's discourse of the flourish of doubtful expressions, and endeavor to reduce his words to direct, positive, intangible propositions, and then compare them with one another, he will quickly be satisfied there was never so much glib nonsense put together in well-sounding English. He'll quickly be satisfied there was never so much glib nonsense put together in well-sounding English. You're telling me, man. If you think it not worthwhile to examine his works all through, let him make an experiment in that part where he treats of usurpation, and let him try whether he can, with all his skill, make Sir Robert intelligible, inconsistent with himself, or common sense. I should not speak so plainly of a gentleman, long since past answering, had not the pulpit of late years publicly owned his doctrine, and made it the current divinity of the times. It is necessary those men, who taking them to be teachers, have so dangerously misled others, should be openly shrewd of what authority this their patriarch is, whom they have so blindly followed, so that they may either react what upon so ill grounds they have vented and cannot be maintained, or else justify those principles which they preached up for gospel, though they had no better an author than an English courtier. For I should not have writ against Sir Robert, or taken the pains to shew his mistakes, inconsistencies, and want of what he so much boasts of and pretends wholly to build on, scripture proofs. Were there not men amongst us who, by crying up his books and espousing his doctrine, saved me from reproach of writing against a dead adversary? They have been so zealous in this point that, if I had done him any wrong, I cannot hope they should spare me. I wish, where they have done the truth and the public wrong, they would be as ready to redress it, and allow its just weight to this reflection, viz., that there cannot be done a greater mischief to prince and people than the propagating of wrong notions concerning government. That so at last all times might not have reason to complain of the drum ecclesiastic. If anyone concerned really for truth undertake the confusion of my hypothesis, I promise him either to recant my mistake upon fair conviction, or to answer his difficulties. But he must remember two things. First, that cavalrying here or there at some expression or little incident of my discourse is not an answer to my book. No whataboutery. Second, that I shall not take railing for arguments, nor think either of these worth my notice, though I shall always look on myself as bound to give satisfaction to anyone who shall appear to be consciously scrupulous in the point, and shall shew any just grounds for his scruples. I have nothing more but to advertise the reader that Observations stands for Observations on Hobbes, Milton, and Company, and that a bare quotation of pages always means pages of his Patriarcha, edition 1680. Of Civil Government, Book 2, which is the start. Chapter 1. It having been shewn in the foregoing discourse, 1. That Adam had not, either by natural right of fatherhood or by positive donation from God, any such authority over his children, or dominion over the world, as he pretended. 2. That if he had his heirs, yet he had no right to it. 3. That if his heirs had, there being no law of nature nor positive law of God that determines which is the right heir in all cases that may arise, the right of succession, and consequently of bearing rule, could not have been certainly determined. 4. That even if that had been determined, yet the knowledge of which the eldest line of Adam's posterity, being so long since utterly lost, that in the races of mankind and families of the world there remains not to one above another the least pretense to be the eldest house and to have the right of inheritance. All these premises having, as I think, been clearly made out, it is impossible that the rulers now on earth should make any benefit or derive the least shadow of authority from that which is held to be the fountain of all power, Adam's private dominion and paternal jurisdiction, so that he will not give just occasion to think that all government in the world is the product only of force and violence, and that men live together by no other rules but that of beasts, where the strongest carries it, and so lay a foundation for perpetual disorder and mischief, tumult, sedation, and rebellion, things that the followers of that hypothesis so loudly cry out against, must of necessity find out another rise of government, another original of political power, and another way of designing and knowing the persons that have it, than what Sir Robert Filmer hath taught us. To this purpose, I think it may not be amiss to set down what I take to be political power, that the power of a magistrate over a subject may be distinguished from that of a father over his children, a master over his servant, a husband over his wife, and a lord over his slave, all which distinct powers happening sometimes together in the same man. If he had be considered under these different relations, it may help us distinguish these powers from one another, and to shew the difference betwixt a ruler of a commonwealth, a father of a family, and a captain of a galley. 3. Political power, then, I take to be a right of making laws with penalties of death, and consequently all less penalties, for the regulating and preserving of property, and of employing the force of the community in the execution of such laws, and in the defense of the commonwealth from foreign injury, and all this only for the public good. Chapter 2. Of the state of nature. I guess we're just numbering paragraphs now. I'm going to not number the paragraphs. To understand political power right and derive it from its original, we must consider what state all men are naturally in, and that is a state of perfect freedom to order their actions and dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit, wherein the bounds of the law of nature, without asking leave or depending upon the will of any other man. A state also of equality, wherein all the power and jurisdiction is reciprocal, no one having more than another, there being nothing more evident than that creatures of the same species and rank, promiscuously born to all the same advantages of nature, and in the use of the same facilities, should also be equal one amongst another, without subordination or subjugation, unless the lord and master of them all should, by any manifest declaration of his will, set one above another, and confer on him, by an evident and clear appointment, an undoubted right to dominion and sovereignty. This equality of men by nature, the judicious Hooker looks upon as so evident in itself, and beyond all question, that he makes it the foundation of that obligation to mutual love amongst men, on which he builds the duties they owe one another, and from whence he derives the great maxims of justice and charity. His words are, The like natural inducement hath brought men to know that it is no less their duty to love others than themselves, for seeking those things which are equal must needs all have one measure. If I cannot but wish to receive good, even as much as to every man's hands, as any man can wish unto his own soul, how should I look to have any part of my desire herein satisfied, unless myself be careful to satisfy the like desire, which is undoubtedly in other men, being of one and the same nature? To have anything offered them repugnant to this desire, must needs in all respect grieve them as much as me, so that if I do harm, I must look to suffer, there being no reason that others should shew greater measure of love to me, than they have by me shewed unto them. My desire, therefore, to be loved of my equals in nature as much as possible may be, imposeth upon me a natural duty of bearing to themward fully the like affection, from which relation of equality between ourselves and them that are ourselves, what several rules and canons natural reason hath drawn, for direction of life no man is ignorant. Oof. But though this may be a state of liberty, it is not yet a state of license. Though man in that state have an uncontrollable liberty to dispose of his person or possessions, yet he has not liberty to destroy himself, or so much as any creature in his possession, but where some nobler use than its bare preservation calls for it. The state of nature has a law of nature to govern it, which obliges every one, and reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind, who will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. For men being all a workmanship of one omnipotent and infinitely wise Maker, all the servants of one sovereign Master, sent into the world by his order, and about his business. They are his property, whose workmanship they are, made to last during his, not one another's pleasure, and being furnished with like faculties, sharing all in one community of nature, there cannot be supposed any such subordination among us, that may authorize us to destroy one another, as if we were made for one another's uses, as the inferior ranks of creatures are for ours. Every one, as he is bound to preserve himself, and not quit his station wilfully, so by the like reason, when his own preservation comes not in competition, ought he, as much as he can, to preserve the rest of mankind, and may not, unless it be to do justice on an offender, take away or impair the life of what tends to the preservation of life, the liberty, health, limb, or goods of another, and that all men may be restrained from invading others' rights, and from doing hurt to one another, and the law of nature be observed, which willeth the peace and preservation of all mankind. The execution of the law of nature is, in that state, put into every man's hands, whereby every one has a right to punish the transgressor of that law to such a degree as may hinder its violation. For the law of nature would, as all other laws that concern men in this world, be in vain, if there were no body that in the state of nature had a power to execute that law, and thereby preserve the innocent, and restrain offenders. And if any one in that state of nature may punish another for any evil he has done, every one may do so. For in that state of perfect equality, where naturally there is no superiority or jurisdiction of one over another, what any may do in prosecution of that law, everyone must needs have a right to do. And thus, in the state of nature, one man comes by a power over another, but yet no absolute or arbitrary power, to use a criminal when he has got him in his hands, according to the passionate heats, or boundless extravagancy of his own will, but only to retribute him so far as calm reason and conscience dictate what is proportionate to his transgressions, which is so much as may serve as for reparation and restraint. For those two are the only reasons why one man may lawfully do harm to another, which is what we call punishment. In transgressing the law of nature, the offender declares himself to live by another rule than that of reason and common equity, which is the measure God has set to the actions of men for their mutual security, and so he becomes dangerous to mankind. The tie, which is to secure them from injury and violence, being slighted and broken by him, which being a trespass against the whole species, and the peace and safety of it, provided for it by the law of nature, every man upon this score, by the right he hath to preserve mankind in general, may restrain, or where it is necessary, destroy things noxious to them, and so may bring such evil on anyone who hath transgressed that law, as may make him repent of doing it, and thereby deter him, and by his example others, from doing the like mischief. And in the case upon this ground, every man hath the right to punish the offender, and be executioner of the law of nature. I doubt not, but this will seem a very strange doctrine to some men. But before they condemn it, I desire them to resolve me, by what right any prince or state can put to death or punish an alien for any crimes he commits in their country. It is certain their laws, by virtue of any sanction they receive from the promulgated will of the legislative, reach not a stranger. They speak not to him, nor, if they did, is he bound to hearken to them. The legislative authority, by which they are in force over the subjects of that commonwealth, hath no power over him. Those who have the supreme power of making laws in England, France, or Holland are to an Indian, but like the rest of the world, men without authority. And therefore, if by the law of nature every man hath not a power to punish offences against it, as he soberly judges the case to require, I see not how the magistrates of any community can punish an alien of another country, since, in reference to him, they can have no more power than what every man naturally may have over another. Besides the crime which consists in violating the law and varying from the right rule of reason, whereby a man so far becomes degenerate and declares himself to quit the principles of human nature and to be a noxious creature, there is commonly injury done to the same person or other, and some other man receives damage by his transgression. In which case he hath received any damage has, besides the right of punishment common to him with the other men, a particular right to seek reparations from him that has done it, and any other person who finds it just may also join with him that is injured, and assist him in recovering from the offender so much as may make satisfaction for the harm he has suffered. From these two distinct rights, the one of punishing the crime for restraint and preventing the like offense, which right of punishing is in everybody, the other of taking reparation, which belongs only to the injured party, comes it to pass that the magistrate, who, by being magistrate, hath the common right of punishing put into his hands, can often, where the public good demands not the execution of the law, remit the punishment of criminal offences by his own authority, but cannot remit the satisfaction due to any private man for the damage he has received. That he who has suffered the damage has a right to demand in his own name, and he alone can remit. The damnified person has this power of appropriating to himself the goods or services of the offender, by right of self-preservation, as every man has the power to punish a crime to prevent its being committed again, by the right he has of preserving all mankind, and doing all reasonable things he can in order to that end. And thus it is that every man in the state of nature has a power to kill a murderer, both to deter others from doing the like injury, which no reparation can compensate, by the example of the punishment that attends it from everybody, and also to secure men from the attempts of a criminal, who having renounced reason, the common rule and measure of God hath given to mankind, hath, by the unjust violence and slaughter he hath committed upon one, declared war against all mankind, and therefore may be destroyed as a lion or a tiger, one of those savage wild beasts with whom men can have no society or security. And upon this is grounded that great law of nature: whoso sheddeth a man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. And Cain was so fully convinced that every one had a right to destroy such a criminal, that after the murder of his brother he cries out, "Every one that findeth me shall slay me." So plain it was written in the hearts of all mankind. By the same reason, May a man in the state of nature punish the lesser breaches of that law. It will perhaps be demanded with death. I answer, each transgression may be punished to that degree and with so much severity as will suffice as to make an ill bargain for the offender. Give him cause to repent and terrify others from doing the like. Every offense that can be committed in the state of nature may in the state of nature also be punished equally, and as far forth as it may in a commonwealth. For though it would be besides my present purpose to enter here in the particulars of the law of nature, or its measures of punishment, yet it is certain there is such a law, and that too as intelligible and plain to a rational creature and a studier of that law as the positive laws of commonwealths, nay, possibly plainer, as much as reason is easier to be understood than the fancies and intricate contrivances of men, following contrary and hidden interests put into words. For so truly are a great party of the municipal laws of countries, which are only so far right as they are founded on the law of nature, by which they are to be regulated and interpreted. To this strange doctrine, viz., that in the state of nature everyone has the executive power on the law of nature, I doubt not but it will be objected, that it is unreasonable for men to be judges in their own cases, that self-love will make men partial to themselves and their friends, and on the other side, that ill nature, passion, and revenge will carry them too far in punishing others, and hence nothing but confusion and disorder will follow, and that therefore God hath certainly appointed government to restrain the partiality and violence of men. I easily grant that civil government is the proper remedy for the inconveniences of the state of nature, which must certainly be great, where men may be judges in their own case, since it is easily to be imagined that he who has done so unjust as to do his brother an injury will scarce be so just as to condemn himself for it. But I shall desire those who make this objection to remember that absolute monarchs are but men, and if government is to be the remedy of those evils, which necessarily follow from men's being judges in their own cases, and the state of nature is therefore not to be endured, I desire to know what kind of government that is, and how much better it is than the state of nature, where one man, commanding a multitude, has the liberty to be judge in his own case, and may do so to all his subjects whenever he pleases, without the least liberty to anyone to question or control those who execute his pleasure. And in whatsoever he doth, whether led by reason, mistake, or passion, must be submitted to? Much better it is in the state of nature, wherein men are not bound to submit to the unjust will of another, and that if he judges amiss in his own, or in any other case, he is answerable for it to the rest of mankind. It is often asked as a mighty objection, where are, or ever were, there any men in such a state of nature? To which it may suffice as an answer at present, that since all princes and rulers of independent governments all through the world are in a state of nature, it is plain the world never was, nor ever it will be, without numbers of men in that state. I have named all governors of independent communities, whether they are or are not in league with others, for it is not every compact that puts an end to the state of nature between men, but only this one of agreeing together mutually to enter into one community and make one body politic. Other promises and compacts men may make with one another, and yet still be in the state of nature. The promises and bargains for truck and co. between the two men in the desert island mentioned by Garcilaso de la Vega in his History of Peru, or between a Swiss and an Indian in the woods of America, are binding to them, though they are perfectly in a state of nature, in reference to one another. For truth and keeping of faith belongs to men, and not as members of society. To those that say there were never any men in the state of nature, I will not only oppose the authority of the judicious Hooker Ecclesiastic Paul Lib I Sec 10, where he says, the laws which have hitherto mentioned, i.e., the law of nature, do bind men absolutely, even as they are men, although they have never any settled fellowship, never any solemn agreement amongst themselves what to do or not to do. But forasmuch as we are not by ourselves sufficient to furnish ourselves with competent store of things, needful for such a life as our nature doth desire, a life fit for the dignity of man. Therefore, to supply those deficits and imperfections which are in us, as living single and solely by ourselves, we are naturally induced to seek communion and fellowship with others. This was the cause of man's uniting themselves in the first politic societies. But I moreover reaffirm that all men are naturally in that state, and remain so, until their own consent they make themselves members of some politic society. And I doubt not in the sequel of this discourse to make it very clear. Next video is going to be Chapter 3, The State of War. Also stay tuned for Plato's Protagoras, coming up eventually. That'll be all in one long one. That won't be one take, though. I'm going to be reading that in a couple days. Subscribe if you want more of this. This is super painful to make. It gets corrupting audio files. Man, that's frustrating. Anyway, I just needed to rant about that. That's why there's a bit of an audio switch in the last couple of minutes there, because I could never recover the first... Actually, I could never recover the third recording attempt of the end, so I had to re-record it again today. Anyway, that's another minute that you didn't need. Subscribe, share this. See you next time. And Chatelet.